So the things I want to do is I want to talk just a little bit about the politics of the Jobs Act, which I think you all may know more than me, but to the degree I can tell you what I know, I thought that might be useful. Joe, your lobbyist is going to come on at the half-hour point and tell us even a little more about the politics of what's going on in Washington. In case he and I disagree, you'll have 2 points of view. And then the two things I wanted to talk about, the letter mostly, I heard from a few folks about the draft, and I can tell you sort of what they said. The two questions that I have that I think we should discuss is sort of, do we have the general balance right and by balance, I mean sort of our ideal and what we think is practical at the moment. And that was something I sort of strove for, and like, does that work in your eyes? The next thing is how precise and how detailed and how telling them exactly what to do. I think we already err a little bit on the side of over prescribing, and some of the comments from the others in the group wanted more prescribing. So I think we should talk about that briefly. And then any other comments, whatever comments you have. Some of you may say, tear it up and start over. I shouldn't preclude that as a possibility. So does that sound right? Like a good agenda? Is everybody down with that?
That'd be good.
So what I know about the politics is the big question in the Kaine, from the Senator Kaine perspective, is what, and the sort of the coalition that is standing there ready to support the Kaine and Portman, is the big question is that it's, that their idea is that we're going to attach jobs to something. So that's a little different than College Promise, right? But what they're spending the year doing is waiting for the vehicle to come by that they can attach it to. And they thought attach it to the China competitiveness bill. They are not apparently thinking about attaching it to reconciliation. And it's not clear to me exactly why. There's some people who seem to think it couldn't pass on reconciliation. There are other people who just seem to think it's a problem in Kaine's office. He doesn't have the right language. I don't know, I can't really understand it, but it doesn't sound like it's going in the reconciliation package. So then does it go, the next best hope I think is a PROPS, which would happen at the end of the year. And frankly, I mean, and we don't know anything about free college, right? It's been surprising to me that in all the talk about what's in the human infrastructure, there's no talk of free community college, like it's not on any lists I've seen. So are they dropping free community college? Are they waiting for the second reconciliation package to put the third, I guess it'll be the third reconciliation package to put free community college? It's sort of not clear how the administration's thinking about the legislative calendar either. But all the more reason, in my view, that we sort of keep our proposals kind of vague. I'd be happy if they pass the Jobs Act, if they pass free community college and they pass the Jobs Act attached to something. I'd be happy if they didn't pass free community college and did pass the Jobs Act. I don't think we should tell them exactly what to do or say write a new piece of legislation. One of the comments from somebody else said, we want to tell them to write their own legislation. We don't necessarily want to tell them to write their own legislation. We just want them to do what we want them to do. Let them figure out. It's their job. That's why we pay them the big bucks, is to figure out how to attach things, what should get attached. That's my view. You may have different views. But that's pretty much what I know about the politics. So, amorphous is the answer on the politics, and I'm clear as mud. It's Washington. It's always clear as mud. But again, I think what that dictates to us is keep it general, keep the general thing what you want, don't tell them how to do it. The other small thing on DC is that I took advice from several people, and the idea that what people said was, don't send it to the secretary, send it to the, what we call the four corners, the four legislative leaders, Democrat, Republican, House, Senate, and CC Cardona. But since we're actually talking about legislation, it doesn't go to Cardona. So those are, and I guess this is something that we didn't talk about last time, but I said in the letter that maybe I should explain. It has been given to me advice even before I wrote the letter on this point about how prescriptive to be. We should not tell them to attach the two because we don't think they can necessarily pass at the same time. So that's politics. Do other folks know more than me? Do other folks? You may. Yes, Bill.
I wouldn't say I know more than you on this, Tamar, or anything. First of all, good to see all my good friends on here. It's good to see. I'm looking forward, Joe, Lee, Monty, all of you. I'm looking forward to seeing you without a square around your face. Sometime it would be so good to see you guys in person and get a handshake and a hug. So anyhow, from what I've heard, in this, we had a Higher Learning Commission board meeting several weeks ago. And one of, during our time period where we just are in seminar professional development, Michelle Asha Cooper from the department zoomed in to speak to us, and good information. At the end of her presentation, I asked, and Michelle's a good friend, so I feel I can ask her anything. I said, I keep hearing about free community college, and I keep hearing it floated, then kind of dissipates. If that comes to fruition, Michelle, I haven't seen anything to say, here's what it will look like. I said, what can you tell us? And her response was, well, what do you think it should look like? Which that kind of clued me in on something. And then I would think I was validated here recently. Lee, I had a conversation with Amy Lloyd just a couple of days ago. And while she didn't say it either, I honestly, Tamar, I think I'm becoming a bit more of a believer that we are going to need to be more prescriptive because of what you said a second ago. I think James Cavall is going to come in and try to do what he can to move things, but on some of the things we're talking about, he just doesn't have that history or mental skill set in terms of that. I respect him a lot. I think he can do a really good job. He just doesn't have that space. He hadn't occupied the space. So I honestly think that what they're going to ask, and what I think they're doing, I think this is my own speculation, I think they're going to want community college leaders to help them craft this, because I don't think they know. I understand what you mean by wanting to stay, not wanting to get too prescriptive, but I think if we aren't prescriptive, they're going to ask the wrong people to be prescriptive, and I think that's a risk. If community college leaders are not the ones helping craft this, I'm fearful as to what it will end up looking like. Yeah. So just my own perspective, I'm not getting the impression that there's some, I could be wrong, Lord knows I'm wrong every day on many things. I don't think there's this file in the cabinet with them that says free community college and here's how we're going to do it, here's what it'll look like. I don't think that file exists right now.
Interesting, really interesting. So the question for you, and then I'd like to hear the other's point of view. Where in your ideal spectrum of precise and detailed and prescriptive, what do you think about the letter we have? I mean, I think it's pretty precise and descriptive.
I think it is, but I think it's just a pink opinion here. I would want to, if I'm any of the folks that we want to send this to, knowing how many things they are getting on an hourly, if not daily basis, I'm just more of a fan of short to the point of here's what we specifics on, for lack of a better term, recommendation, for lack of a better term, and an appendix that has all the other stuff to it. Because quite honestly, they're going to look at this, and because of all the others they're getting in, I don't know how much, I'm not saying they won't, I don't know how much of this that they will read, digest, and understand. Because the danger of it is, we have all the backstory in our heads, and many of these folks have no backstory in their heads. And so I think from my own perspective, I would wonder if a thing that says here, just really, here's what we, I like, again, use the term recommend. Here are our recommendations or whatever, something else attached that does have some of the details that they have if they want to. But I just don't know, with all the things that these folks get on a daily basis, I don't know how much of a 3-page document from us they're going to read.
Okay, this is about standard for a legislative letter, but that's fine. Let's hear other voices, more practical, less practical, shorter letter. What do folks think? Monty disappeared, he's coming back.
Yeah, tomorrow, if I can, I'll try to stick with you guys by audio here. I'm having a little bit of difficulty with the internet connection. I hope you can hear me okay. Let me just a couple of things. First, I think the address of the letter is, I think it would be better suited sent to the Four Corners, as you mentioned a few minutes ago. That makes more sense in terms of what we're trying to influence. The thing that sticks out to me, and I'm glad to work with you on perhaps some language, is we still have to define the problem we're trying to solve. The letter is well done if you know the detail of the if you will.
Interesting.
But
We're losing you. We're losing you.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I think at some point, and then I'll stop because I'm not sure I'm going to be able to keep the connection here. But at some point, I think we have to have some kind of statement that outlines for these members the need for. We created this notion of 64 million working age Americans with a high school diploma or less. We created that by policy, by not establishing something beyond high school as the standard. And so we got a chance now to fix that. And to fix it for the adult population as well as for the high school graduates. So I think it's really important that we talk about that, and the fact that we have an economy and a workplace kind of challenge that says that it's going to continue to be more and more difficult for folks to be able to find those jobs. And so without some type of concerted effort nationally, we are going to continue to fall behind.
Okay, so the letter's getting shorter, now it's getting longer. I'm teasing. This is good. This is all.
No. I would just be very blunt right on the front end. This requires a solution, and now there's got to be a sense of urgency. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. I totally get it. I'm just teasing. Okay, others. Michael, talk to us. Don't write in the chat because I can't read the chat and talk at the same time.
I was just agreeing that I think the more concise policy recommendations bulleted would be the way to go. The challenge with that is that how in the details of the mechanics are you going to be willing to go? How do you define quality labor market outcome, for example? And because the devil's in the details with some of these kinds of things. But I also agree that the legislation as it's currently written indicates a lack of acumen or understanding of these details, and is a transfer bill as indicated by the.
Well, again, what's tricky is we're not sure what we're revising. That's the thing. We might not be revising the existing bill. And I don't think we should address, I mean, this is aside from all these bigger points, but I don't think we should address any specific bill myself. I don't think we should say take the Murray blah, blah, blah bill and change it. I don't think we should take Jobs Act and change it. I think we should stay at the 60,000 foot. Here's the problem. Here's the elements of a solution.
And I think they're in this letter. We want to have short-term certificates count. We want to have AASs count. We don't want to unintentionally exclude things that have immediate workforce implications from these kinds of funds. Under a traditional definition of stackable, meaning that it's fully transferable, that's going to really gut the impact of this. And it's captured in the letter, but just perhaps make it more concise.
Others? Joe, you look like you're thinking.
Yeah, well, I'll weigh in on a couple of those things, and appreciate the comments of colleagues here. I, maybe kind of back up a little bit. Something Monty was implying that I think gets lost on a lot of people is why this matters, and making sure that we get that across. And this will be between us, but you and I have been in I think a couple of meetings and some others and some panels and this sort of thing where even the current incoming president of or chair of the board of AACC has said that they don't support a free college. And yet, if I were to push, which I have on that, he promotes access, he promotes opportunity, he promotes creating a better life that's out there for folks, and giving folks who have not been able to participate in higher ed that ability. So I think that a lot of people confuse the what with the why. Secondly, but in there, and Michael was, and I think Monty implying it too, hitting on that. The short term matters because I know, as some of you do, James Quall really pretty well, and I know his thinking on a lot of this, and that's not a area that he is really aligned with. While he was in many ways came up with the concept of free college back during the Obama years and put it to paper, he's never really supported the stackable concept or that idea. So I think that's the type of specific we probably need to put in, while being more generalized in some other areas, such as first dollar versus last dollar, which James is the first dollar a proponent, as anyone who I guess a purist or a true believer in this space is going to be. It's probably not practical from that vantage point, which I guess is the real issue. What's practical from as opposed to ideal? And I think the being more general, where we're going to be pushing against the practicality of the proposal, but being more specific against what would be, I think, directionally doable. Such as creating that access and opportunity, and focusing on the stackable credentials, and always inferring the importance of accountability within whatever is done or approved.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Bob, hello. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Sorry to be so late.
No, it's great. So we're talking about, well, I won't repeat everything. We'll keep going, and then we'll come to you.
So
Dave,
Tamar, so I was talking with Ron Painter at the end of last week, and one of the things he was bemoaning was this whole question of how. And I think it goes back to Bill's point. I think a lot of the folks don't really know how. And so in the absence of us helping them to understand that, I think we're going to go back to the problem that Bill outlined. So to the degree we can give some examples of how, I think would be helpful. And I think back
so,
to
I really strongly
Go ahead.
disagree with that. I'll just say that, and let's sort of have it out.
Okay.
I mean, members of Congress, they like to figure out how. So you tell them why, and you tell them what, and then they figure out how. I mean, they're just not interested in our legislating. I mean, why and what, and maybe what is what you guys are talking about that should get added, but I think how is not there's no, really, we're wasting our time for us to craft how. My 2 cents.
Well, so I'll give you an example of what Ron and I were talking about. So we were talking specifically about WIOA, but I'll just use this analogy. Until you actually do a torque test, you really don't realize what torquing is really about. And that either most people under torque or over torque. Well, the implications of that are significant. Well, that's the problem with this stuff, because people don't really know that part of the equation. Then they're solving the wrong problem. It comes back to Monty's point, right? So what problem are we trying to solve? Maybe you don't need to get into a lot of detail about how, but it's not losing that perspective of that's an important part of the equation.
Right.
And so, I mean, if you go back to a report that EMSI released on the demographic drought, the SANS-demic, we're moving in the wrong direction around labor force participation rates. How are we going to get people back into the labor force? We can't get people back in the labor force. It doesn't matter how much money you're going to provide. Why aren't they coming back into the labor force? I think part of it is people don't want these long-term educational programs. They need short bursts that are very specific to a certain type of skill they need to get back into the workforce. So that's an example.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think the why, I'm persuaded we don't have enough why. I totally get that. And what, why and what? So maybe we're just having a word thing here. Others want to weigh in?
Well, Tamara, I agree with a lot of what Lee, Monty, and Joe has said. So my first impression reading the letter was well done, lots of great stuff in it, but it was a bit too long. I think we need to shorten it, concise, get to the point that Lee just made, that this is about getting Americans, getting people in various communities who are significantly impacted by COVID-19, economic depression, to get back to jobs. We have to pound on that really clear early in the message. Part that I also concerned with the concern you raised, Tamar, to express this thought, they don't know what they're doing. I think we need to be very careful. Maybe saying, well, we have a group of experienced community college educators across the country. If you need us, we're here, be ready at any point. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, that's easy to do. That's usual. That's sort of boilerplate in the last letter. Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, and I hope I'm not being I hope I was communicating well. So when I say that they don't know what they're doing, I think my more accurate statement of what I'm saying is that they haven't decided what they're going to do. So for example, as I said, someone like Michelle Cooper, very, very smart person, has very knowledgeable of community colleges. I don't think it's that she doesn't know. I think there's nothing that they've etched in stone to get there. The other thing I would say is, as far as those who I think we need to help in saying, here's the how, I think it's truly the DOE, because, and it may not be the legislators we're talking about that you mentioned, Tamar. I think it's the DOE that we can give that kind of advisement to, if you will, because I think they're going to ask us. I think they're going to want to know that. Now, whether or not Congress listens to them or not after us, I don't know. But I would also say many of us on this, probably here on this call, while I would agree with you that Congress, they don't want you to tell them how, when they come to the table, in many cases, they've already spoken to some of us anyway to get some of that input of wanting to hear from Joe May, wanting to hear from many of what are you looking at on this? So I do think that Congress, while they will do a lot in terms of what this the pushing and pulling on it, I think their pushing and pulling is going to also be informed with many of us, and I just think I think we need to have and Joe, I think you have a great point. It'd be very helpful if many of us have the same or singing along the same tune, rather than kind of being a little misaligned on what that tune is from a standpoint of how you get to and what those pieces are.
Bob?
Well, obviously I'm coming in having missed the last several comments, but in here I'm hearing people refer to adults, I think, and short-term credentials, which I'm strongly in favor of. But all of the public rationale for this is, we're going to give people 4 more years of education, 2 at the front end for 3 and 4 year olds, and 2 at the back end for 18 to 21 year olds. And I think, well, we ought to feel free to say whatever we want to say about the importance of reskilling for adults and short-term credentials. This conversation, at least as it's taking place at Washington, is about 18 to 21 year olds. And it won't surprise you, Tamar, if I tell you that I think the most important message we are sending is that this legislation provides the opportunity, or should provide the opportunity, for every young American to get a first post-secondary credential with value in the labor market. I think, from the last conversation we had, the dilemma here is that most of us are thinking this is a great opportunity to really put front and center the workforce mission, equip kids with a first credential with value, let them then decide if they want to go on straight away to get a 4-year degree, great. But if they don't, they ought to be able to walk out the door with something that has value in their regional labor market. Unfortunately, as Michael Bettisworth pointed out to us last time, the legislation that is, that Congress drafted before this, the current process that's going on, it gave totally short shrift to the workforce side of the agenda. As he said, workforce was mentioned once, transfer was mentioned 20-something times.
Yeah.
And I think we really need to cut into that in a pretty heavy, powerful way, maybe even overstate our case just to try to get a bit better balance around the discussion that's taking place in Washington.
Yeah, and the only thing I think I'm gonna really welcome Alex Knock is going to show up here in 2 minutes or 4 minutes or something. Lobbyist, Joe's lobbyist, I think of him as. He does some other things too. I'm going to really be interested in what he says about where the pen is going to be and who this should be addressed to, and whether he thinks we should be like building off of any legislation rather than just saying what we think the world should look like. My instinct is to sort of say what we think the world should look like, why we think it should look like that, and what we think it should look like.
I agree.
Who said I agree?
Bob.
Bob, okay. Bill, question. Oh yeah, Aaron, are you?
Well, I was just saying, I agree with a lot of the really good comments so far, but to Bob's point, are we basically saying this is never going to be about adults? It's always going to be about recent high school graduates, and we should give up on the adult component? What is because I'm hearing, I think, some different.
I don't think so. I think it's just emphasis. It's both and. Let's start with what they're talking about.
No, but yeah. So is our consensus in agreement that we should not leave it at the young adult population, that we need to be about opportunity for returning adults? Is there consensus on that?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, but even Bob's phrasing, Bob can speak for himself, but once he's off mute, but even Bob's phrasing is you get the first credential of value in the labor market, then you have to, you may want to come back later. So we want.
But I think it's really, I mean, if I'm right, and maybe your lobbyist person can tell me that this is all being framed as adding 2 more years post high school, then I think we need to address that. I also think we need to make a really powerful statement that says that's fine for this piece of legislation, but there's a critical need for much more support for community colleges to address the upskilling, reskilling agenda for adults, and that ought to have at least equal priority. And maybe there are other places in the legislation for that, but for this particular piece, of the reconciliation bill that they're working on, I think we need to make it clear that if it's 18 to 21-year-olds, let's be really clear about what we think the priority is for those next 2 years post high school.
Alex, you're just on cue. We were just needing you. Hello, how are you? Thanks for joining.
How you doing? Hey, Joe.
I haven't seen
Alex.
you in your office in a suit yet. Do you know everyone on the call? Should we do you want people to
like 10 minutes or so? So maybe we should just, I know a lot of
let's go into it then. Yeah. And people, if you don't know, you can follow, I'll help, we can follow up in some way. So let me start with by asking a couple of questions, because we were just at the point where we're kind of unsure of ourselves. So we, want to write this letter, and we want to tell them that workforce is important. And we want to tell them here's why workforce is important. And then we want to make some suggestions about what they should do. I'm kind of arguing that we should not tell them, we should not play off of any bill in particular. Like, we should not say we're fixing the College Promise legislation that's floating around. We should not say we're tweaking the Jobs Act. We should not say, anything to that kind. We should say, here's why we think something different, why we think workforce is important, and here are what the elements that should go in any package. Do you disagree with that? And tell us about what you think the prospects of either, where the heck are we on College Promise? Why isn't it mentioned in the reconciliation lists? And where the heck are we on the Jobs Act?
Well, I think the bills are 2 very different bills in the sense that, the committee leadership on the Jobs Act isn't really a fan of the Jobs Act text, as both Joe and Monty know from all their work with Ramsey for the last couple of years. They are obviously fans of the America's College Promise kind of approach, right? Because they have helped introduce those bills, even though it's Levin and Baldwin on the Senate side. So you could treat the bills differently, but neither bill will be identically just plunked into reconciliation, because Reconciliation is very specific rules about what you can do in terms of policy versus spending items, which I can go into more if folks want. But so I don't think it's a problem if you write about a particular bill or not. I mean, you could certainly write about concepts, you know, if that's what you're saying tomorrow. And I think that's a fine thing to do. You know, you are just speaking, if you're speaking about reconciliation, you're speaking to Democrats, right? So, I mean, they love collectively the America's College Promise. So that doesn't have the same baggage that the Jobs Act does.
Well, what are we speaking to? Is America's College Promise going to go in reconciliation? I think you've told me you don't think jobs can move in reconciliation, or, you know, any workforce element. When do we really think this could happen?
So, I mean, right now, they are trying to get agreement over a top line number. Unfortunately, Congress doesn't work like you or I or anyone would here in terms of going, all right, how much money do we need? What's the number? They go 3.5 trillion, which is the number that's been thrown out there by some Senate Democrats. They did not get to that number by using a calculator to add up like what the Health Committee did. You know, they just, you know, they're just kind of, and then they'll figure out what everybody needs, you know, within that. So that number will get divided amongst all the committees that that will have instructions to produce a budget reconciliation bill. So free community college, a la the America's College Promise, is definitely one of the top priorities by Democrats, and certainly including the Biden administration, to be in this package. It's hard for me to imagine Help and Ed and Labor getting instructions to do a budget reconciliation bill without some version of free community college being in there. I think it's much harder on the Jobs Act front, and Joe and Monty have heard me say this before, because one, the staff leadership of those two committees aren't the biggest fans of the actual Jobs Act itself, and that's why you saw, you know, just a couple of weeks ago, Murray and Burr's staff negotiate a different version of the Jobs Act. I don't even know if I could call it a different version of the Jobs Act, but a different slice at short-term Pell or workforce Pell. And but that negotiation has a lot of things in it, that the language that just wouldn't fly in a reconciliation bill because of the rules of reconciliation, not because people don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's right for folks to try and push something. I just think it's going to be mechanically very hard for them to do it.
Well, so my imagination of how this would work is like, let's pretend College Promise does get in the reconciliation. I agree with you. I don't think like a short-term thing is likely to get in the reconciliation just because it's not enough. The support split among the parties. But what we're going to ask for, it was your language originally, it's in our first draft of our letter, you know, that a companion legislation move at some point that creates money for short-term workforce programs. So we're not actually trying to squeeze them both through the door at the same time. We're just saying, if you're going to, when you do one, you need to do the other. But all the more reason, I'm glad to see you nodding, all the more reason not for us to address fix College Promise by doing X, Y, and Z, tweak jobs by doing Y, Q, and R. Let's just say, here's the overall view of what we want, and here's why we want it.
It sounds like you want to talk about what you want to see in those policies. And I think that's a perfectly, yeah, I'm never a big fan of outside organizations trying to directly tell Congress like how to mechanically do its job, because whether Congress does a good job of that or not is a different question. You got to put that to the side. It's like, you know, telling a doctor how to doctor, right? It's like, actually, you know, I'm fully in support of providing you the resources to help diagnose the problem. You go figure out what test to order. I'm not going to tell you what test to order it on what day. So, yeah. You know, people get touchy about being told how to do things. So, but I think staking out the priorities as leaders in this field about what's important to see in those policies, absolutely, because they aren't experts in what makes a good promise program or what makes a good short-term or workforce Pell program.
Last question, and then others have questions, I'm sure. Who would you address it to? I had it first addressed to Cardona, and then I thought maybe no, the Four Corners. Who would, given the strange configuration of that, we're not sure who we're influencing because we're not sure which legislation or which package or which, who would you address it to?
Well, I wouldn't write it to Cardona because you're trying to tell Congress how to do something.
That's
right?
yeah. So it's Four Corners. Four
know,
Corners and Ed and the education committee?
yeah, I mean, you certainly could address it to the Four Corners. I mean, you're really writing to Patty Murray and Bobby Scott, to be honest with you. I bet if you want to, I mean, there's nothing wrong with also addressing it to Burr and Fox, but Burr and Fox are not going to be participants in scouting out the policy. This is at least in the context of reconciliation. I mean, to be fair, since you're adding short-term workforce Pell in there, it probably does make sense to write to the Four Corners because eventually Fox and Burr will be in the mix.
Yeah, that's what we're, yeah, okay, that's good. So others have questions? That's this is super helpful. I'm so glad somebody on this call pays you. No, I'm only kidding. Other
18 to 21-year-olds.
Oh, so we have a sort of a divide in the group. I mean, I don't know that it's a divide. I think it's sort of manageable, but I'll put it as if it's a divide. But we have a lot of people in the group are really concerned about, adults, basically, adults coming back for reskilling. I mean, so let me just again be clear about what our real project is. So the first of the letter that we're going to revise, but we do have a draft. We're not really commenting on free college per se. We're just saying if you're doing free college, there's this glaring problem that needs to be addressed in America, which is community college workforce short term. And the letter that we have isn't very specific. Are we talking about 18 to 20 years olds, or are we talking about adults? There's some people on the call that are very concerned about adults. We all are, I would say. But Bob's thrust is, let's at least start it with a frame that talks about younger people getting a first job with a first credential a first credential that has labor market value, because that's what the people in Washington think about when they think about community college. So you sort of address it where they think the problem is, and then you expand to include adults.
Yeah, I mean, I think DC increasingly understands that there's an older student population that needs to reskill. I think most members of Congress, obviously personally, we're not that sort of student, right? But I think at least staff certainly understand that's an increasing issue, and that's thanks to a lot of work that everyone probably on this call has done. I mean, you certainly could talk about that. I might worry a little bit about, for folks that are savvier, like on the committee staffs, not understanding why you're selling this as an 18 or 19-year-old kind of benefit, which, I mean, if you're agnostic on the who, it would be, obviously. There's nothing to say that 18 or 19-year-olds couldn't. Because a lot of the committee staff know what we're really talking about is making sure adults, especially at community colleges, not that you just serve, your 30 or 40 or 50-year-old kind of individual, but, I mean, the committee staff would primarily be the recipient of this letter. You want to influence, know that you guys serve the Cleveland. I don't know everyone in this call. I shouldn't be generic in that. The community college sector serves a lot of adults. So they might think that's odd, but it's not bad. It's just an angle.
I think it can be fudged, Bob. I don't think it's an either or. I think I can write that so that you're happy, everybody's happy.
Well, let me ask Alex a specific question. Do they think they are adding 2 more years of education beyond high school? And if so, do they think that should be open to people of any age? My impression has been that much of the conversation, at least in the popular press, has assumed we're now talking about, in effect, extending 2 more years of publicly subsidized education beyond high school. So there is a.
So I don't think, there's how it's sold and what members think they're doing. So, I mean, there is certainly some selling by some folks of the concept of, hey, we're, going to grade 14, so to speak. There's some of that, and that's for folks that want to kind of view this, pre-K through 16 kind of universal kind of, support system. The real way most members seem to be selling this is we're making college cheaper for you, right? And they don't necessarily connect it with like a grade 13 or grade 14 per se, and part of this, the reason they're selling it this way is it's obviously a community college focused proposal, obviously, except for the 2 years of funding it, MSIs, right? So they also want to capture this idea that if, you're a parent, you're sending your kid to a 4-year school, or you're a 4-year, you also might get a benefit from them, even though you have to be at a minority serving institution or first start your career at a community college or something like that. So I think this is largely supposed to be a college cost affordability tool, more so than the 13 and 14. But there's certainly people that are selling it like that, Bob. That's true. And I would say that's mostly on the really left progressive side of the debate. I don't want to call it the Bernie Sanders side of the debate, but folks who want to view this continuum of we guarantee education all the way through 16th grade in a way to kind of think about it.
But, and Bob, I mean, my concern here is I think we're drifting back to commenting on the American Promise Bill, which I don't think is what we should be doing. I mean, we guess we want to feed into that debate, but we're not trying to, I don't know. Well, I'll be quiet. Other people want to ask Alex?
Well, maybe Alex comment just a little bit, because I think the clarity, part of the problem is people are conflating like a Tennessee model or what Bernie Sanders are thinking or other things that are out there within term that I think you're right. I mean, some of the language used has been debt free. It ties into the elimination or of loan debt and that sort of thing that's out there. So I think it's probably more related as we see it to that issue than it is to the other of a K-12 kind of extension model. And to Michael, your question, we really see this as a effort to put people to work. I mean, give them the skills that are there all the way through. So I think, that's the trouble some people have, and why you hear well-meaning people talk against the free concept. They're missing that this is really, about expanding opportunity and getting people the knowledge and skills they need for jobs. So.
Good, thank you. I was asking
that correct?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, Joe. Sorry, Michael. Go ahead, please.
No, please respond to Joe.
I just real quick. Yes, I think you're right. And two, I think part of the messaging of the free thing is something that works very well with Democrats, right? And again, the dynamic you're seeing here is Democrats talking to Democrats, right? Because this will be a Democratic only thing if it goes. But when you look at polling, with some people, it also means like no responsibility. Right. So I think if you're going to talk about this, Joe, to your point, the idea that, yeah, okay, we're paying for part of it, but the whole idea is it's not free to just be free. It's free to go to work. Right. And it technically isn't free to go to work. Yes, you could get a 2-year degree and not go get a job after. Right. But the whole point, and I think one of the reasons the community college kind of concept is more sellable is it's around acquiring the skills and knowledge to get a job, better your education, and better your employment spots. Opportunities. I mean, I think depending on how you're going to sell it, there's different people to sell it. The Democrats right now are mostly trying to sell it to themselves. So this is about, to Joe's point, debt-free, no cost, free. Sorry.
I know you have very limited time, Alex. Anybody else want to get in? I mean, yeah.
No, so this is again the similar thing. Not to comment on the specific bill, but what we really want to avoid is an unintentional pen that limits this to things that are only quote transferable, and that's which can happen unintentionally if the wording isn't done correctly, and so that there's not, Alex, what I'm picking up from you is there's not an established resistance towards short-term workforce-oriented training that will result in a job that isn't transferable. That's not an established mental block in this.
So if it's Title IV eligible right now, folks are good with it. If it's not Title IV eligible, like something that you would get out of the Jobs Act, like below 600 clock hours,
Sure.
Joe knows this and Monty knows this. I mean, the rhetoric coming from some people on the progressive left about predatory schools and programs is kind of shocking, because the folks that would do it would be community colleges, the same people you want to give free money to. So it's like, it's a very interesting thing. So if you're talking about a Title IV eligible course, no one's going to argue with you.
But we're not. I mean, that's our whole point. The point of our letter is we want money for non-Title IV eligible.
No, I get that. I get that on the jobs, but if you're just talking about free community college, like folks don't want that to go to like a 150-hour short-term hour course. They don't really want it. When I say folks, I'm being very generic here. there are a lot of people that are opposed to opening up Pell for that, and they are not anxious to open up free community college to that, if that makes sense.
All the more reason why I don't think we should be calling our things an amendment to the College Promise Act, because we're not going to get it. Like, we're just not going to get it. So we want to
I
say
think
at
you
the
made the
same
case.
time, you
So
do
you're
something.
like, both things are important. We want to provide a sense
Yeah.
of the ability, to Joe's point, to get a 2-year degree possibly, or something shorter than that. Michael, to your point, that's Title IV eligible, that I'll just call for this point free. But at the same time, there are other courses and training and education down the road that you can get with a Pell Grant, right? That would allow you to access also jobs, employment, et cetera, that sort of thing. And
Yeah,
the great
that's-
thing, Joe knows this, very little secret, if somehow jobs or a version of it passes, it probably makes those courses eligible for free community college at the same time, because it stuffs it in the Title IV envelope. So, you know, don't tell anybody that. That's secret. You know, I don't know if the Democrats, they hate jobs, have entirely figured that dynamic out yet, to be honest.
Well, the bad news, we just did the survey where we asked colleges about how long their non-credit programs are. The bad news is that most of them are under 100 hours, like overwhelming majority. So like the people we're going to help is a small, even with jobs, a pretty small sliver.
It's
but,
even, yeah, that's a subset of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Okay.
Anyone else? Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Last question, last bid, going, super helpful.
Truthful. Good to see you guys.
Thank you, Alex.
Joe.
Talk to you
Hey,
soon.
thanks, Alex.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Wednesday. Bye.
Bye
Thank
tomorrow.
you.
Talk to you later.
So I think I understand what everybody wants, unless there's other stuff you haven't voiced that are what you want. Monty, I'll take you up on, if you're still there, I'll take you up on your suggestion to send me a few paragraphs on the why.
I probably should point out, just in case folks wonder, Alex is definitely a Democrat, but his firm is bipartisan on that. So with folks from both sides, so that if he peered one way or the other, they're pretty balanced. So
He's just a good technocrat by now. I've been around DC long enough. I know the good lobbyists and the people who really know what they're doing and who see the lay of the land, and he is one of them. So coming back to our letter, we just have 10 minutes. I don't want to abuse people's calendars. I think that we do need a more robust section about why. I think it needs to be shorter. I am hesitant to add more detail than we already have on the how, but I think Bill and others who feel there's detail missing, perhaps you should look at the letter and annotate what's missing in your view. Like what would you like to, because I feel like we've already gone up to the line and almost over it in specifics of how. So I think, I don't know if Bob is smiling at us. No, he's smiling at someone else. You should look through and see what you want to add on the how and just send it to me.
I'll say on that, I'm really not, I wouldn't say I was advocating for something missing. I think I was just really advocating to see if we could, I think I'm just a bigger fan of something that is, I'm a fan of something shorter that just really is very succinct on boom, 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 yeah, so that they know exactly what we're getting to up front, and including statement of the problem, as Monty mentioned. That's it wouldn't be that I'm saying something's missing. That's just my own.
Okay.
opinion.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Yeah. Tracy, you haven't spoken. Aaron, you've spoken. Anybody who hasn't spoken? Tracy, do you want to weigh in?
No, I think it's appropriate. I appreciate where the direction's going. I think, I don't know how many of us are MSIs, and if that's meaningful, that might be helpful to make sure.
Are what?
Our minority serving institutions, whether Native American, Hispanics. There's an element of, because I think that changes that elevates in some ways the conversation around equity and supports. So if we focus on workforce and we focus on training, I think equity and all the social supports that go with that are important.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't, I don't think like no legislation that's about changing Pell eligibility is going to speak to supports. Like, we're not trying to boil the ocean here. We're just trying to get money for short-term programs.
And I do appreciate the list of here's a litmus test of what we want these programs to do. I think that's really helpful. And frankly, this letter will help me have other conversations with my legislators, and that's what I'm most interested. I mean, fundamentally, that's what I'm interested in. So I
Yeah,
appreciate
that
it's
makes
not
sense.
prescriptive,
Yeah.
and it gives me another tool, frankly, with my colleagues to be able to have those conversations.
Yeah, that's a good point. Other thoughts? Somebody else want to do this drafting? No. Monty, I'm going to take you up on it. Monty, you here? Are you here? No, who knows?
Tomorrow, I'm sharing my write-up markup with you as well.
Okay. Bob, if you have language that you want to throw in the Y, send it my way. You're really good at that. Okay. So let's hope, I mean, as much fun as this is, as much as I like to see you all, let's hope that we don't have to meet again. And I'll just take your suggestions, I'll draft, and then we'll send it around. And if you don't like it, you'll say, I don't like it. And if you do like it, you will. And if we need to meet again, we will. But let's see if we can go from here to the paper stage. Does that sound right?
Sounds good.
Any last points for the good of the order? All those people who are in their vacation houses in the Berkshires and can't get through, and the Hamptons and can't get through, and I'm so glad we decided without them.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.